Hi everyone, this is Joyce
and Matt.
We are the owner of Short and Stout Tea, and we are so happy and so excited today to finally come back on the camera again after a long while. And podcast in the form of 2023, this is what we're hoping to do. We have been trying to be doing the video and YouTube, and podcast is actually something that Matt has been thinking to do a while back, and you actually have been trying to do that in the past.
Back in 2018, but then it was both of us in 2020 during COVID that we launched several videos that we put out there, and that was a great opportunity to, it was right during the lockdown and
not much going on in life, right?
Yes, life was on pause, and so we were a big part of the tea shop is a social connection. And we were losing that, and we were missing that, and we felt and heard from the customers, because we didn't really close, that they were missing that too. So that was a good opportunity to do that.
To be able to put our face and reconnect with our customers. Mm-hmm. So that's the goal. That's what makes us excited, doing what we're doing every day, to be able to talk to people, right? So when life gets busy, I barely be behind the counter very much to see everybody. So this is the way that we feel like we can reconnect, right, to the customer again. So maybe we can tell everyone what our theme or what is this podcast is going to be. Since it's your idea, right?
You mean the name?
The name. Let's start with the name. So what's the name here?
Tea First. So Tea First is the name because we want it to be tea.
Wow.
It's all about the algorithm, right? If somebody's searching for a podcast and they want it to be about tea, you're going to put in the word tea. But a lot of algorithms, they don't always work that way. They just, if you put in tea, you're going to get a lot of, if tea comes in second, it just goes by the first word.
Well, that's what you said. You told me, because when we go through the name, and, even just like a short and stout, name has to have meaning, right? That's what the first rule is when you do a business or any type of podcast or any type of program, you want to have the name that's catchy. So for you and for us, to do this, tea must be in the name,
for
right?
Sure.
And it's your rule or your thought that tea has to come first. So.
And we were talking while conceiving the newest iteration of this, which is, I guess, technically the third iteration of the podcast. We knew that it wasn't just going to be factual mumbo jumbo, me so stiff, right? It was going to be a conversation, and we're only experts of our own experiences, and that'll come back probably, but. We have, I think, quite a bit of experience with, us in our lifestyle and having, I was going to say young children, but they're not. They're, teenagers now. And then there's the business growth and there's the traveling. So I think there's going to be a lot of tangents that we're going to go on, but always when we get too far, we can say tea first.
Well, tea first. And that's a little bit of history of, the name a little bit, if I can say, is, because tea has to be in the name. And with what you said, it's like, well, you need to have the word tea first. So we actually bounced on a few ideas of maybe tea break, tea chat, tea and lifestyle, right? Based on what you just said.
Yeah, lifestyle.
Because a lot of time when this conversation happened at home, when we not at the tea shop after we send the kids on a school bus or at nighttime when the kids go to bed, that we have a little bit of time to talk. And a lot of time, because like Matt and I, like we are so different we are the same in many ways, but we are also different in many ways in terms of even like background of my culture, your culture, wording. I'm a second language speaker, so don't expect me to always speak, perfect English, and then he would pick up on some word that I say. So there's a lot of conversation over a cup of tea become in many ways of lifestyle, maybe said travel.
Yeah, back to the English as a second language. I love it because it makes me even take things not for granted, and I like to, you like say, what's the definition of is? Not that
True.
you'll ever have. That's a Bill Clinton quote. But it is like, yeah, what is the definition of it is?
Yeah.
You know, or onomatopoeias. Did I say that correctly?
I
love onomatopoeias.
What is that? What is say that word again?
Onomatopoeia.
Onomatopoeia.
What does a duck say in Thailand?
Gap gap.
What does it say in America? In English?
Quack quack.
Quack.
That's what we try to tell our kids, like teach our kids to remember. Like I would ask them in
Anywho.
time, but anyway.
And
So a
back
lot
to
of-
tea
yes.
first. And I was always a big fan of the but first tea.
Okay.
I always
Okay.
like that saying where,
Mhm.
you know, like, hey, whatever problems there are, but first tea and everything will get sorted out. So,
But then the tea
little
is
plan.
last, right?
Right. So we just switched it around.
No,
and said
because
tea
then I said,
first.
well, come on, something is tea first, something is tea first. So I'm like, you know what, Matt, why don't we just go with tea first? That's
Tea
the name.
first. That's it. That's all
That's
you
it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the history of the name.
Yes.
And that's the history of how we make a New Year resolution of like, all right, you know what, this is time that we have been gone from connecting with the customer, the social side of connecting with the customer, especially like now that, you know, our operation is bigger. We have like 15 employees now starting from the day one when it's just me working alone. I do the kitchen by myself. Matt thought that I was a superwoman where I can do the
I
front.
still think you're a superwoman. And I'll tell you too, I remember opening up on Saturday. We would open at 10 o'clock. I'd prepare everything, open at 10. I'd still be in the kitchen. And you do things because you could hear this door open
True.
from the kitchen. So it's the kitchen, the hallway, the front room, the foyer, and then the front door.
And a little bit cracked that you can hear the sound.
And then you can hear the door. And it's like, it would be like 10:45 and you know, you get a good 45 minutes worth of the kitchen work before you got a customer.
True.
So yeah, 2013.
And that's why there's a lot of story of Joyce oftentimes burn things, right, in the kitchen because I would like bake something in the time that
I'm usually the burner in the kitchen. Don't take that title away from me.
No. All right, I do good. So, now that we have 15 plus people working behind the counter, you don't always see me, you don't always see Matt, although we try to make an attempt that, to be here at a certain time. But this is a great way because we can and we must spare an hour every 2 weeks to do this.
That's what I was going to say. Are you saying that you have, so much help and life is so luxurious and free
It's not luxury.
And let me finish.
Okay.
That you have all this free time to do this, right?
No, we don't have free time to do this. And I'm so bad at time management in my life. Seriously, being a mom of 3 kids, and a lot of you know, when we first started Tea Shop, our youngest one was only 2.5-year-old, and that wasn't the plan. We thought that we could. All right, we started Tea Shop. We started business from going to the craft fair, right? That's how we start. Sell the tea at the craft fair, wanting to do online, but we fell more into the craft fair. And we can talk about this another episode because, hey, this is our 10 years. So we're going to be talking about how we get here 10 years ago, how Joyce just came with the 2 suitcases from Thailand and now established in America. But, it's like, it's a stepping stone, but we are here, to do this. So, we're going to keep going. And yes, it's hard to prioritize the time because, of course, running a business idea pop all the time. There's always idea that pop in our head, but it's about priority, what needed done while being able to keep the balance of raising 3 kids. Now they're a teenager now, but it's a big thing to balance between life in a family, raising the kids. And my family is mostly in Thailand, so we only rely on your family to help, and we don't have a lot of resource, friends to help raise these kids. But Tea Shop is kind of like that second home. To do this.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're going way back with, again, the origin story of the tea lounge, and before we had it, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had, the loose tea shop, and then we could have a table. Maybe it was big enough to have a table, and the kids would come home and they would do they would go to the tea shop and they would do homework on that table, and and then we ended up falling into this, what I would call a sprawling location, which we've since expanded. So I didn't want to go too far down that
Into
road,
that, yeah.
but
Because this is January, like I said, we have a plan. It's a New Year's resolution, so it's my goal, at least mine, and we have to do this together. We're gonna try to make this out every other week, right? We must spare time to an hour and a half for every 2 weeks, and I think we can afford that time, to do this. And it's just a way that we can reconnect with our audience and our customer a little bit.
Right. Well, I'm usually the very restrict or conservative person. You're the risk taker when it comes to the business. And but what I've learned from you is that timing is never perfect, right?
Well, can I jump in that one? I'm not a risk taker. I mean, like, I like challenge my life. Let's put it that way. And I have a strong drive. And I guess because when I have a desire to do something, I'm just fearless of failure. And I never think of things that I will make me fall apart because I just have so much passion. I just cannot turn my brain off. So it just needs to happen right now, right? And that's not always good. But as luck has it, timing is not right, but it's doable.
Right. And it's all about resources too. So fortunately, we got Noah in, a high school student from Guilderland who has a background in audiovisual. Very talented in many, many ways. So we're more than happy to say, we're going to make a good go at this.
We're gonna try this out one way or another.
So Noah, thank you for your inspiration.
Yep. You'll come in the camera sometimes, right? It has to
He
be.
said no, but I think
with Noah, well, one day we'll have a high school takeover because our kids are now in high school too, so he'll take over.
I think it'd be great.
Because then hey, I take it for granted how talented kids in this day and age are, especially if they grow up with all the device and they well worse in social media than I do. I'm like an old lady a couple of years ago trying to do YouTube by myself, where this kid can just click.
He troubleshot our echo issue in half a second. He's like, oh, this is a problem.
So thank you, Noah. And so what tea are you drinking today? Because let's go back to tea. Because January month, right? We are trying to do maybe focus on Give Back a Tea 101. I mean, Matt, you have been doing a lot of session on that.
So yeah, probably I've done well over 50 tea talks over the past 10 years. And like you alluded to, January is hot tea month. So what tea are you drinking, Joyce? That I made you, so I know.
Well, I have been addicting to matcha lately, like a pure matcha. You're talking about matcha just whisked with water, straight and astringency and full of umami.
And why did I choose that cup for you?
You're gonna really make me talk about this?
Just 10 seconds.
Well, 10 seconds. Well, this is one of the first design of Shore and Stout mug that we designed to serve here when we first opened the store. Not the best quality, right? It's a lot of scratch happen. And I'm one who never like to throw anything away, and I try to be environmental conscious. So, I come from Thailand, I see a lot of garbage all over. I see poor people. So that's a big part of me that I don't like to waste things. So when, cup chip, if it's not broken in pieces, if it has a little just imperfection, I kind of tend to use it by myself, or like keep it for myself or use it for decoration. So after we upgrade, which is your version now.
Before we move to this, that is your daily cup.
That's my daily cup now because no one uses it and I just hate to throw away. That's kind of like scratch all over, but it's still functional.
Absolutely. So I threw myself a curveball. I'm actually drinking, and I'll give you the clue. It's my blend.
Ooh.
Which is my blend?
Smoky?
No.
Do you blend a few things?
Okay.
Well, the thing is, like, we blend a lot of things in-house too. So you have blended tea. You don't have straight tea.
I didn't have straight tea today.
That's how I start. I start my tea journey with blended tea. I start with flavored tea. I start with something fun and exciting. And that's even going to be like our motto line. Remember the All Day? the next generation of tea with blend fusion tea.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a
The
good start.
Tivana,
That's like,
chasing after Tivana.
yeah, that's like our first. That's like my first go-to though. But that's how I get into the door of tea.
Mhm.
Even though I grew up with the Chinese grandpa who would drink tea in a big pot and have tea all day in place of water. But now, maybe because I'm getting older, I not too old, but my palate changed. So now I'm on straight tea, and I like the matcha from simplicity of it. I like the flavor, but I also like simplicity of it. We'll have matcha workshop another time.
We will, yeah, because there's a lot of nuances to it.
Well, that's what you are actually trying to do. Not trying, have been doing too. Like, so Matt did a lot. So go back with the tea talks. You did a lot of tea talk in the past. You got invited to the library. You actually do it here. This is our new room. So we'll do a tour of the tea shop one day. But with this new add-on, we dedicate this room for record room, maybe a smaller group but in the past when we started, you did the group here too.
I've given a conference
then,
or a gong fu session, a couple of seminars. Yeah.
Yeah, but then you got hooked into like library program or like garden club where you got invited for a larger, like hundreds of audience, which is great experience. It made my job a little bit harder when I have to serve tea, like as an sample because we go in, but we got our girls to do that. So family business, so we try to teach them what we can. We always travel with them. So, every trip we go, we always travel with them.
So you covered a lot there. But a goal of this podcast is certainly the T101, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to be talking
for this episode, yes.
For this episode, we don't, just to allude to what we're going to talk about is, what is tea after all? And so we didn't finish what I'm drinking here. So
what is that?
Yeah, this is Queen Catherine.
So still pure tea, though. Still straight tea.
It is still straight tea. It's
good.
not a flavored tea. It's still pure tea. It's just a blend.
Tell us about Queen Catherine.
So Queen Catherine is a blend of Chinese teas, black teas. And what I like about Chinese black teas is that they're roasty as opposed to the Indian black teas that are just really bitter. So there's a lot more roastiness, nuttiness, maybe like chocolatiness, as opposed to just like, oh, I need my sugar and cream, British style. So that's why I really like this blend. And as you alluded to, I went to lately, like the last 5 years, more single origin, single cultivar, but I chose this blend today. Well,
it's your pride, and you don't drink it with milk. No. So this is perfect because Queen Catherine is on the lighter side of the blend. Yeah. It's not built for like strong cup of tea that would take milk and sugar, and you don't drink milk and sugar in your tea. So Queen Catherine is perfect choice today.
Yep.
And did you have something already this morning?
No, this is my first cup of tea. I know I was gonna have something before, but I got a gong fu session later that we're gonna drop 2 teas as well. So I got a full day.
You don't want to be tea drunk.
Too drunk. It's with friends today, so I don't mind being tea drunk.
So let's get back to the basic because we have a lot of questions from customer a lot of time who walk in the tea shop and kind of like look surprised because they're used to like one kind of tea, 2 kinds of teas, and then here we have over 150 kinds, right?
So let's start again back to the beginning and how we got involved in tea. So it was, as you know, but the audience might not, it was a gift for our anniversary that I got. I knew that there was a tea shop on Lark Street in Albany at the time. And I went in there and I smelled different kinds of teas and got a sampling of 4 different kinds of teas and a nice brewing basket and brought it. You enjoyed the gift as far as opening it. And then you didn't drink any. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll have to make her tea, which is fine. So I made you tea and you're like, oh, yeah, this is good, And I was enamored by the fact that, well, I went to a tea shop and I got 4 different kinds of teas, but they all looked so different and tasted so different.
I think that, not that I don't, so being at home with kids, it's tough to take care of yourself. So brewing tea, is one thing, like I stop doing things for myself when I have kids.
Teas that I got at the tea shop on Lark Street Again, all different colors, all different flavors, and looking at them, all different ingredients. So I started like investigating a little bit of what makes this, and what makes that. And, and truthfully, if all tea came in from a tea bag, we wouldn't be in the tea business, because it was that exploration that really got me excited and interested in wanting to learn more about tea. And I guess really the point of today's episode is, what is tea?
What is tea? Because I think that a lot of people don't know what tea is, because that's one thing that I learned in American culture and even in Thai culture, like if you steep something in hot water, what do you call? If it's not coffee, you call it tea.
Right.
So if it's ginger, if it's chamomile, if it's mint, people call it, oh, you really like a cup of tea. And every culture, when you offer a cup of tea for you, it can just be their local herb or something that they would brew for you, homemade something, and they call it, here's a cup of tea for you.
For sure. Tea means a lot of things to a lot of different people around the world for a long time, like 5,000 years. So you hit on a point there that during my tea talks, I would always ask the question, what is tea? And people would say a lot of those things. And they would sometimes get more generic by saying leaves and herbs and roots.
Closer.
Right. But, it's the leaves. And then I would say, well, what kind of plant?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one plant. And then this just doesn't make sense. It's very counterintuitive of the fact that it comes from one plant. But the truth is that it does come from one plant. It's called Camellia sinensis. And there's two big divisions off of Camellia sinensis plant. And there's Camellia sinensis from China, and Camellia sinensis assamica, found in the Indian region of India.
And what's the difference?
So the difference between those two is, I like to say, we'll think of those two regions. Those two regions, tea is a product of its environment, and the climate is very, very different in those two locations. So in China, it's more temperate, where there's seasons. And then in India, the seasons are hottest.
Just like Thailand, right?
Just like Thailand, right. And then just lots of rain for a short period of time. So the climate does change the flavor profiles of what teas can be produced from those plants. Let's just talk about the tea plant in and of itself. So we've seen ancient tea trees. And what's the definition of an ancient tea tree?
It's a wild grown. It's nothing pampered into like the tea farm that we see with a shortcut, row and row of beautiful tea plantations. It's a tea that's just like a plant that grows in the wild. Like a big oak tree growing in the wild, maple tree that is grown in a natural forest.
But also 100 years old.
Some of them last 1,000 days. We just went to Thailand this past year, where there's a national preserve in some section of Chiang Rai province where, they say that there's a lot of wild tea
that are
grown there.
Yep. So, and those tea trees are, and you said like oak-like trees, they are big. They are 10 feet, 15 feet. There's the Hill tribes that will climb the tree to pick the leaves for pu'er in Thailand. But that's not what is typical, what you would see in Japan or in China for white teas or oolongs.
Different variety.
It's different variety. But I guess where I'm going with this is that those tea trees are not the typical. The manicured tea fields is what we kind of envision when we think of tea farms. And going back to the varieties and the climates, we have Indian tea that are the biggest, boldest, strongest, most bitter. And they don't make really good white tea and green tea because of the climate and the variety. Because I would venture to say the variety is sometimes matches the climate.
True.
Although you can make varieties in a laboratory, scientifically to bring out elements that are better for something that the producer wants to create in that tea or adapt to a type of environment. But generally speaking, black tea comes from India. and which is Assamica.
Generally
can have a green
speaking,
tea from India.
You can have some, like, I mean, I wouldn't say all black tea come from India because it's true, because I know you're about to say that Chinese produce a lot of black tea from Sinensis variety too. But it's just that characteristic of Sinensis and characteristic of Assamica. The big difference is one is bold, that you often say about that is good to make black tea, because what is black tea characteristic? You want it to be bold, you want it to be something stronger. And that's what British like to have, right? With milk, with sweetness, with sugar cubes.
Yeah.
So Assamica variety is perfect. That's what we found a lot in the forests of Thailand too.
But to cut you off, sorry, thank you for correcting me. If I said that all black tea comes from India, that's wrong.
That's wrong.
What I guess I meant to say was that most tea out of India is black.
Right. But India do produce, because like in a lot of like new teas that I've seen, and that's confused me for a while, to be honest. When I say, whoa, white Assam, like I thought Assam is only black tea.
Right.
And then I have to reset my brain a little bit to think that it is not, that is Assam white tea, because a lot of time, like just like the word of tea become the word of the meaning of something that's deep in the water. And when somebody say white pu'er, white Assam, I have to reset my brain a little bit in terms of thinking, what do you mean? I thought Assam is black tea.
Right.
But it's just a white tea that produced from Assamica variety.
Well, we have boxes downstairs that say
Green oolong.
Green oolong or green black tea, where it was a black tea variety made into a green tea.
And
but
it's
anyway,
confusing.
there is a lot of, and this is another good reason why we're doing this, is to straighten it out, to clarify. Because the lines do get crossed in a lot of different ways. Even so much was that Darjeeling, a black tea from India, is not, I don't think is completely considered, in my opinion, might not be 100% black tea, in my opinion. We're going to go into what makes black tea and green tea. Back to China. So China, you have temperate climates, you have high elevation, and you have a tea bush that is more tender and softer. And I would say, right now, historically speaking, this wasn't always the way, but the best Chinese teas are the most lightest in flavor. And so
almost
they strive.
Almost to the water level.
Some can get that.
That's at least our personal opinion.
Right.
From a lot of tasting that we've done, is that the higher grade of oolong we get, the higher grade of green tea we get. Of course, I'm not saying it's just like water, because there's a big difference between tasteless, and there's a big difference let me say it again. There's a big difference between being tasteless and something that is so smooth that you can't pick out one single profile from it. And the smoothness that my experience is a higher grade of, let's say, even jasmine, white tea or green tea, when it's come to Chinese tea, is almost like so smooth like water, but yet it has something flavorful and dense in that.
And I think floral is a big part of that profile. But so Chinese black teas tend to be roastier as opposed to bitter. Hence we were talking about Queen Catherine, a blend of Chinese black teas. Oolongs and green teas are vegetal, but not, steeping for 3 minutes at 170 degrees shouldn't be like a god-awful experience of bitterness. Which it could be if you're going to do that from a green tea from India. It tends to be very, very bitter and vegetal bitter. It's not the best experience.
It's a different variety.
Because it's, what's that?
It's different variety. It's
Different
like product of,
Yeah.
like you said, it's product of environment. Even if the tea grow in the same farm, but this year climate, like what we have right now, is 40 degrees in January versus last year where it's been cold since October. Not last year, I don't know. I don't remember the weather last year, but I'm just saying if it's like something that the weather is more consistent, that's also contribute to the flavor that come in the tea. So that's kind of like hurt our interest now, especially me and matcha and many other tea that I drink. Is like I tend to gravitate myself into single cultivar, because like you get to learn about the single cultivar and how environment play the role into the flavor of the drink itself, of the tea itself. So back to tea. So you said the tea, let me summarize here. So the tea comes from tea plant, and it's a designated plant that called Camellia sinensis, right? And so just to say that, okay, that means that other plant that is not Camellia sinensis, technically are not tea, correct? Is that how it is? That's what we should lay the ground here, right?
If it doesn't come from the tea plant,
Then
it's not tea.
So that's the take home message at this point, and I want to make sure that that's clear to this point where where we are trying to give the knowledge in the basic tea 101 is that tea has its own plant, Camellia sinensis.
And what are some of the elements of that plant?
What do you mean by element?
Well, I guess caffeine is an element of that.
Okay. Yes.
So all tea has
Mhm.
caffeine in it.
Mm-hmm.
And all tea is going to be plucked from the tea plant. It's going to be made into a type of tea.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of tea ranges from white tea,
Mm-hmm.
yellow tea, green tea, oolong,
Mm-hmm.
black tea,
Mm-hmm.
and pu'er.
Mm-hmm.
There's even purple tea out there.
This can get into the very fine detail of the categorize, how it get categorized, but the basic that we see mostly in market, it's black, green. And then I'll be honest that I only learned about white tea as I get into the business 10 years ago. Because I always heard about black tea, which is more mass produced, and then the green tea. Those are the big two categories that I know in the tea world. And then I learned about white tea, I learned about pu'er, and then I learned about, I heard about oolong too, but I didn't know much about it. But this 5 main variety, and I'm gonna leave out purple tea, I'm gonna leave out yellow tea, this 5 main, right? White, green, oolong, black, that's it, 4. White, green, oolong, black. These 4 main category are the major, tea category that you're going to see in the market. And if it is from Camellia sinensis or Camellia islamica, it considered tea in our tea business, tea world, right? Now, all those, since it comes from the same plant, so how is made into different variety though? Like what made them different?
I mean, different types.
Different type. I'm sorry. Yes, so different types. So you want to
Sure,
explain that?
I would say it's oxidation.
Mhm.
Oxidation is what makes those teas different, those tea types different. Teas from those tea plants.
Yeah, well, you usually, that's it. You get, yes, because in the tea talk, we usually play, we have to have 20 questions on this, right? What make it different? And a lot of time people say, guess so many
Time
things.
of year,
Time of year,
part of plant.
But, yes, so what make white, green, oolong, black, if they pick from the same plant, the way to make them different is the oxidation process. And me and Matt like to use the word oxidation. You'll see other tea professionals that like to use the word fermented, which is nothing wrong because during the oxidation process, that fermentation do happen, but we don't like to use the word fermentation because it get confused when we talk about pu'er.
I think that the British tend to use the terms in literature and books. You'll see fermentation coming from British or English books. As opposed to American view, which would be oxidation. And even in Asia, most of the times there'll be oxidation.
I would say that the word fermentation get translated from the local saying too. Because when I meet with a lot of farmer, and I can only speak, in the language of Thai farmer, is that they use the word fermentation. That translate word to word between the word fermentation that we say, use that word mak in Thai and fermentation. But I understand what they mean.
Yeah.
But they do use the word fermentation that translate to exact word of fermentation into English.
Right.
So
Yeah, and so what I usually use as an example for describing oxidation to a class, and I didn't bring it. I was going to bring a prop too.
Next time.
Yeah, next time we'll bring a prop. Is a banana. So if you get a green banana from the local grocery store,
I love your prop though. I love your prop. You gotta show that prop another time.
and you take this green banana, you rip down the side of that peel. You take open the other side. You take a nice healthy bite of that, and what do you taste?
Starchy, raw.
Raw, yeah, like powder,
starchy. That's what I say, right?
Makes me remember last week when our youngest took a bite of a plantain, a raw plantain. So yeah, it's raw and it's powdery.
Plantain, or just when I was like, that plantain is sappy.
Yeah, there you go, sappy. So if you left that on the counter for a little while on a summer day, and it actually shrinks a little bit, the peel gets a little bit thinner, the green turns into yellow, maybe even a little couple of black dots, and the fruit itself has even shrunk a little bit. So that all it did was interact with the air, and well, yeah, I don't know where ripe if something needs to ripen on a vine or the tree. Not too sure about that. We need to invite a specialist in for that, which we might do in future episodes. But nonetheless, it interacted with the air, it's oxidized, you take a bite of that, and it's what it's supposed to be, creamy and sweet, and banana-y. But again, the only thing, so what happened with the interaction with the air is that the starches broke down and created sugars. And if you left that on the countertop a little bit too long, it becomes really mushy and it's no longer good, but it's still very sweet. And that's why you put in banana bread.
Different purpose. Once it get just like tea, because there's a lot of questions before when I, behind the counter and the customer asks me, so why are they making so many kinds? It's to develop different flavor, just to make it more exciting in terms of because everyone has different palate, right? Someone like more like bowl side, someone like to have tea with milk, someone like to have just plain tea, straight up, something light. So with the variety, the types of tea get developed to please different palate of people.
Oh, well, we'll even go so far to say that even us in this tea industry, I'll let people in on the secret. So we are counterculture. We have teenagers, and we don't like rebellion in teenagers. However, we in of ourselves, you of yourself, are rebellious, and us being you're Thai, and you have a fantastic palate. You opened up a tea lounge. Almost opened up a Thai
food
restaurant, but there was already 2 or 3 restaurants open. You're like, I guess didn't want to go too far down this tangent, but I think a lot of things that come from the production of something, and it gets over inundated with producers, somebody just shoots over and creates innovation.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to. And sometimes it's purposeful innovation, and sometimes it's by mistake.
And sometimes that innovation cross into the marketing game.
Oh, absolutely.
That's why, and then go back to the big category of what I said earlier is that, when I came here 20 years ago, or 22 years I'm here, but it is mass media of more of black and green. Like I said, that's the only 2 things that I know. And we can talk about red tea too, in this episode, because I know you have strong opinion about that when someone call it red tea and what it really means.
Not the Chinese red tea.
Not the Chinese
celestial
red tea.
seasoning red tea. Yes.
Yes, because if you look at the box, what the box say for the ingredients?
Rooibos.
And it's not, well, first of all, it's not red tea.
Ultimately, let's just talk a little bit more about oxidation, which is what makes green tea, and black tea. So I gave the analogy of the banana, and that's just interacting with the air. So black tea is 100% oxidized, and green tea is 0% oxidized. And instead of the banana, the starches turning to sugars. Yes?
And oxidation is, let's go back to that again. Oxidation is a process where the tea is left to interact with air, right? Just like banana.
In the one example.
Just like banana to get ripe. right?
Yep.
But when it's come to tea, the oxidation process is not just to let it sit on the air, in the air. There's a little process to make the oxidation happen, whether it's tumble the leaves, open up the cells wall, and then leave it interact with the air for different period of time. And again, it's all come down to one thing that I learned. It's just like cooking, right? There's many chefs in the world. There's many family recipe in the world. So a lot of this tea processing, interestingly, is along that line that it is family recipe. And that's why when someone say, oh, we work with a farm that is like 10 generations, 7 generations, you can tell they have their own way of process tea. But so oxidation process is come down to timing, what they think they can draw more from certain period of time. So it's all come down to family recipe that they create. So oxidation is to, well, some people call it fermented, right? Which is like that letting the tea interact with the air, breaking the cell wall, and let it oxidize, and that to create different flavor. And as you said, green tea is non-oxidized, has mean they're not letting it interact with the air very much or none, and then they go all the way to black tea that it can be a few hours to let the tea oxidize and develop that bold flavor. So that's the two spectrum so far. And then you have
Right. So with the banana, the starches turn into sugars, which makes it sweet. But that's not what happens with the oxidation flavor of green tea to black tea. The greenness, vegetalness turns into a maltiness, and that's what gets produced from the taste of a black tea. And then you have oolong in the middle, and oolong is partially oxidized. And if you look at oolong, there's a little bit of green in it, there's a little bit of black in it, so it's again partially oxidized. And so it has those kind of notes. It's kind of more buttery and nutty, but not vegetal and not bitter. And you bring up a good point of, well, how do you oxidize things? Or more importantly, how do you stop oxidation? Because you can't, tea is always interacting with the air in a sense. So you mentioned about withering is the plucking and the withering. And then there's sometimes a tumbling process that allows what you thought was withered actually perk right back up.
Wake up again.
And then they'll wither it again and tumble it, and that'll be a process. And what we're most familiar with is the Thai way to produce oolong. And we've actually visited the same tea farms over several years apart, and their process has changed. But what we learned was that they, generally speaking, take a whole bunch of tea. They and put it in a gigantic cheesecloth. They roll it up and massage it. We've done this in small batches with our hands, but we're talking about medicine balls about this big. And what you have to do is you actually have to draw the juice out. You have to squeeze it because the juice is actually quite sappy. Absolutely right. So you have to draw that juice out. And so that's where the rolling, the massaging happen with these great big heavy machines. Then they take out the ball, they open up the cheesecloth, they put it in a roaster, which I was told originally that was very, very hot. But then I think at other times they don't always have it so hot. And again, back to your trade secrets.
They try it out because a lot of this farm, sometimes they work it from one machine that they use on the father level, and then the new technology come in and they have like a metal. I remember this recent year that we went, we see the big metal drum there, and then we asked them, and then the lady was like, actually we don't use that one. We thought we would use it because it had better production, however it's affected tea leaves, so they go back to use the bamboo style of the tumbling machine. Right. So that's a lot of like try and error for a farmer to, with the new technology to try to save their time on the labor cost, but at the same time, a lot of farms that we work with, like they take pride on their flavor. So flavor is important, so of course the new technology come in, maybe cut the time and labor and cost, but they don't bargain on the flavor. So
right. And you even bring up a point about the bit different processing could be different in the different seasons. So in Thailand, we're in the subtropics where they can pick tea all year round, and sometimes the content of the humidity content in the air is warmer sometime or higher
Rain.
sometime than other times. So they'll actually hydrate the space to modify, to try to keep the conditions the same throughout the year, and the processing can change as well, because the withering isn't as effective in the sun. So I think where other areas, they strive for the first picking, which happens in the springtime. There's a couple different reasons I think of that, reasons why that is. I personally don't like the first picking of Darjeeling because it doesn't give the most flavor of the great muscatel that comes out in the second picking. But what I learned going to Thailand and going to tropical areas, when I love this one specific fruit called mangosteen, and it's only available for about like 4 weeks of the year. And where here in America, we can get a red tomato in February. In the Northeast, which is what I'm used to. But so I'm thinking, well, it should always be available in Thailand. But my point is that tea isn't always available year round. The first picking only comes in the springtime. So not only does it become the lightest flavor, maybe the more floral, all that energy in the bush has been dormant for the wintertime and it comes out in the springtime, but it's also been unavailable for a period of time. So that's why it also has a value, because it's now available.
Well, it's like, I guess that I would disagree on availability of mangosteen year round, because I mean,
You've been lying to me all these years?
No, but it's like, no, you can maybe you find some mangosteen that available in another time that you went, but
and
the price is 4 times the price.
Yeah, your mom.
And maybe that's modified.
Still delicious.
We don't know. It's different cultivar that get modified. We talk about cultivar another time. So, but I mean, yes, when it comes to tea, spring picking is the most expensive because that's like the first picking of the year. But they in Thailand, even in Japan or China, like they pick tea year round too. They go up until maybe October, and then when during the season of the dormant cold weather, they just like stop. But as the tea ages through the season, it can get bitter, it can get bolder. So that's why those who strive for the Chinese who strive for the perfect cup of tea with the floral, with the young notes in it, you can't get that in summer or fall harvest. It's gotta be spring. So that's make the spring tea more expensive too. So go back to your types. So you have the 3 major types, right? The green and black in the 2 spectrum, and then you have oolong that sit between. So oolong is actually the big category, because if it's partially oxidized, 10-15%, the flavor can be like closer to green tea. And then if you go on the longer side, like big red rose, that it's leaves, you start to see the leaves like fully dark, reddish, then it's not really quite, but it's not quite black tea. The body is not heavy like black tea. So that can happen in the oolong category too. So those are the 3 big category of the tea itself, not talking the variety, the cultivar, the variety within that type. Because there's so many types of green tea too. There's so many types of black tea, and there's so many types of oolong itself. So that's we can do that.
I think that would be for another time. I think that's getting into a little bit more specifics of tea. This is why it's such a great topic. There's so many different things. We didn't even talk about brewing techniques either.
No. See, that's why we have to do this. We have to start doing the podcast so that we can record our conversation in different smaller topics that we get repeated questions.
So the continuation of Tea 101 is, if we talked about what is tea, then it was
what is not tea.
What is not tea. So that's what we'll be talking about in the next episode.
I think we get a lot of hint already, so I think a lot of people already can guess what is not tea. But we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And then we'll talk about what is not tea.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.